Welcome to the Carousel of Happiness podcast. I'm your host, Allie Wagner. On last week's episode, I introduced you to longtime Netherlands summer resident Mary Wingate. You learned about how a mother of three transformed this community for the better by dedicating herself to the issues that mattered to her most. Mary was a big supporter of the carousel, and as a result of her generosity, almost 8,000 people have enjoyed free rides on the carousel since she passed away at the age of 87 in 2020. Thank you, Mary. And thank you to those who were moved by her story so much that you reached out to me to share. What does a Beatle have in common with tarot cards and crystal balls? On today's episode, you'll find out. I'll tell you one of my favorite stories about my favorite Beatle and how we can use what's called divination tools to tap into our intuitive guidance. Plus, we'll do a little carousel-inspired intuitive reading together. Let us begin with today's story. One of my favorite stories about my favorite Beatle and my favorite life lesson is a story about George Harrison. In the spring of 1968, the Beatles had just returned from studying transcendental meditation in India. At the time, George Harrison was staying with his mother and reading an ancient Chinese divination text called the I Ching. In it, he read that there is no such thing as coincidence. According to the I Ching, everything happening in this moment is happening for a reason, and anything present in this moment is exactly what is needed to create what is next. George was so curious about this idea that all things are interconnected that he felt called to put the belief to the test. Was the I Ching right and everything was indeed interconnected? Or was life just a series of random coincidences like many in the West believed at the time? George decided the easiest way he could test the principle was to pull out a random book, flip to a random page, and find the first phrase he laid eyes on. Then he'd take that phrase and write a song based solely on it. If what he read in the I Ching were true, the phrase would be exactly what he needed in this moment to write the perfect song at the perfect time. So he did. He picked up a book at random, flipped to the page, saw the words "gently weeps," set the book down, and started writing. While My Guitar Gently Weeps is considered one of Harrison's best songs, and a favorite of fans and critics alike. In fact, Rolling Stone ranked it number 10 in the top 100 Beatles songs of all time. But why are we talking about it on the Carousel of Happiness podcast? We're talking about it because this morning I was in meditation when the memory of that story popped into my mind. Out of nowhere. My mind was completely blank, as is traditionally the goal of meditation, and then all of a sudden, bam. I was remembering all of the little details about that story, not because I had listened to the song recently, not because I had even thought about the song recently. All of a sudden, there it was. Why is that? Why did that specific memory surface today, of all days, on podcast day? I, like George Harrison, like the writers of the I Ching, believe everything is connected. I believe there are no accidents, There are no coincidences. I believe we bump into specific people and have specific experiences all day, every day for a reason. They are not random. I believe there is a reason you had that conversation you had with your neighbor last night. I believe there's a reason you ran into your daughter's teacher at the grocery store yesterday. I believe there is a reason you locked your keys in the car this morning. I don't know exactly why, of course, but I know there is a reason. And I also know that if we start paying attention to what we think is the reason, life starts to take on more meaning. It starts to feel more exciting. Life becomes not something that happens to us at random, but something we can start to actively create. And that's what we're going to play with on today's show. Today, we're going to talk about how we can play a more active role in our own lives. We're going to talk about how we can access our intuition, ask it questions about our lives, and get back an answer we know 100% beyond a shadow of a doubt is just for us. Today, we're going to use the carousel as an example of a divination tool. What is a divination tool? Divination tools have existed for millennia. They've been used in different cultures and spiritual traditions throughout time to help human beings access our intuition. Tarot cards are divination tools, as are oracle cards, pendulums, runes, and yes, the I Ching. And while some of these tools might sound very spooky, very Halloween-y, they aren't that at all. Each of these tools has been used in a different way by different cultures for thousands of years to help human beings connect or reconnect to their innate wisdom, their intuition. Each of these systems is different, but essentially they're built on the same premise. Ask a question, get an answer. That's it. And yes, the tarot and the I Ching are notoriously complicated. It takes practice and dedicated study to fully understand the depth and meaning of these systems. But we're not going to get that complicated today. Remember, ask a question, get an answer. So, for example, if I have a job interview tomorrow, I can ask my divination tool the night before questions about the interview, and I will receive an answer. Is this position the best option for me right now? Might be a question I ask my divination tool. I also might ask, which outfit should I wear, or which route I should take on my drive to the interview? Then I consult my divination tool and I receive an answer that is perfect for me in this moment because there is no other option. Just like George Harrison did with the I Ching. Simple as that. So we're going to try this together, carousel style. I've got in my hand a copy of Scott Harrison's new book, Carousel Soul. If you've listened to the podcast, you know all about it. He goes through every single carving in the carousel and tells a story about the animal and why he created it. There are little poems and stories about the animal, and we're going to use this book and its wisdom as our divination tool. Now, what I'd like you to do is think of an issue you'd like to have more clarity on, that you'd like to understand better. It could be related to your job, your family, your relationships, whatever it is. Think about something you'd like to understand better that matters to you. Now, I want you to think about a question you might have related to this topic. What is it that you really want to know? If you're not sure exactly what to ask, one of my favorite questions to ask my divination tool is, what do I need to know about blank right now? What do I need to know about my son right now? What do I need to know about my job right now? What do I need to know about whatever it is that matters to you? Or you could ask, what do I need to move beyond blank right now? What is it that I need to do to move beyond this thing that I found myself stuck in? Or, what is my biggest obstacle right now, and how can I move past it? Alternatively, you could try asking, why am I feeling stuck in my blank right now? My career, my relationship, my friendship, my income. Or, what is the lesson for me in this situation right now? What is the lesson for me in this thing right now? So I want you to pick a question and ask it aloud right now. Ask the question that is burning most within your heart. Ask the question that matters most to you in the world. Ask the question that pops into the top of your head. Go ahead. Ask it right now. Great. Now you wait for your answer. If it is true, in fact, that everything happens for a reason, that means you are listening to this podcast right now for a reason. At this specific moment in time, at this specific moment in your life, just as you are right now. And everything you are about to hear is specifically for you in some way. Pay attention. Now, I'm going to take Carousel Soul and I'm going to turn to 3 pages in the book. We're going to use the wisdom in these pages as a divination tool. We're going to see what the essence of these animals are, the invitation they have for us, and the medicine they have to give us. I have not chosen these animals in advance. I'm going to do this right now in real time. Ready? Okay. So I'm flipping to a specific page in the book. Here we are. All right. So our first page is the koala. This is for those who have your Carousel Soul book. This is page 89. Many stories from Aboriginal nations describe the koala's importance in the supply and safeguarding of water, encouraging protection over consumption. Several years ago, a good friend of mine being Scott, a good friend of Scott's, a PTSD therapist who managed meetings of a group of veterans, including himself, suffered the tragic loss of her first daughter. I asked her if I could perhaps acknowledge her loss with an animal carving. We agreed that I would carve a koala and place the remains and effects of her stillborn daughter inside the empty wooden space of the carving. We held a private ceremony and installed the koala a year later. The koala is holding on to one of the diagonal timbers supporting the carousel center pole, watching everybody as they ride by. Each year, this mother, with her 2 children, come by to visit the carousel and say hi to Elise on her birthday. So, if you are curious about the story of the koala, which I find quite lovely that we pulled for our first quote-unquote card, I'm going to connect you with a documentary that someone did about the carousel and the koala. So if you found resonance with this story, with this mother's story, I invite you to check out the show notes and watch a clip from Atlas Obscura. So, what's going on here? What is the essence of the koala. The essence of the koala is an acknowledgement of those who are no longer with us, a celebration of the role people play in our lives, even if they don't stay that long. For me, the essence of the koala is acknowledging and holding in reverence those dark moments that allow us the happy ones that follow. If you caught that last sentence, the last sentence emphasizes that this woman comes back every year on her daughter's birthday with her other 2 daughters. That happened. And as happy and joyful as that is, there is still an acknowledgement of the pain that needed to be held carefully and honored to move to the other side. What is the invitation of the koala? I believe that the invitation that the koala has for us is to gently honor, with respect, the pain we hold within our hearts. To acknowledge the love and the loss we experience from other people in our lives, even if they don't stay that long. What is the medicine of the koala? I believe the medicine of the koala is that it's not going to taste bitter forever, that it's not going to hurt forever, that if we can honor those sticky places within us, if we can not push them under the rug, but celebrate them in some way, it's in that celebration that we're allowed to move forward, that we're allowed to enjoy the sweetness. What was the message for you? Remember your question? How does the koala relate to the question that you had in your mind? We're not necessarily talking about a child. Your issue might not be related specifically to this woman's experience. How can you relate those ideas to the question you had in your mind? All right, here we go. Page number 2. Here we go. Okay, so I pulled page 87. So actually 2 pages before the koala, we've got the fox. The fox is pausing on one of the sweeps, looking down for fun. So the fox is one of what we call the hitchhikers at the carousel. He and many of his friends are on top of the carousel looking down on the riding animals below. Now, this is a pretty long one. I'll try to do my best. There were fox farms in this area of Colorado in the 20s and 30s when fashion for some included fox wraps and stoles. When the businesses closed, many foxes escaped into the woods, and their progeny have survived to this day. We frequently see both silver and red foxes in this area. This is true. Scott's friend George Blevins used to live close to him and would feed one little red fox most mornings. The fox would come up and eat food right out of his hand. The exact behavior we know not to encourage. Bad George. When Scott finished carving this life-size fox before putting it up on the carousel, he was interested to see if he could fool the real fox that frequented George's house. He placed it in the middle of his driveway, put a few pieces of dog food on the ground down below to make it look like the fox was about to eat it. Dawn was just breaking. That is a helicopter flying over my house very low right now. Dawn was just breaking, and George and Scott got into the warm cab of his truck, sipped coffee, and quietly waited for the real fox to appear. If it reacted to the wooden fox well, Scott thought it would be proof that he wasn't just a good carver, but a great carver. Unfortunately, the real fox never showed up because they're awfully smart. And let's be honest, this neighborhood fox probably sensed something was not right when two old guys put a wooden figure down in the middle of the driveway and then went and sat in the truck. However, a large black raven flew down and, to their delight, hopped around the carved fox, wanting those morsels of dog food. However, it appeared to be afraid of being attacked by the wooden fox, perhaps reflecting the lacking intellect of the raven, according to Scott. It spent several minutes hopping around the fox, often unsuccessfully going in to try to grab the dog food. Finally, after circling half a dozen times, the bird went all in and got the piece of food on its beak. But it was still in a frightened state, and the bird dropped it while he was trying to quickly escape from the fox, in spite of the fact that the fox never moved. George and Scott laughed as the bird flew away in confusion. He picked up the fox and went to install it in the carousel that morning. What is the essence of that story? For me, the essence of that story is twofold. One, Scott and George had a particular plan in mind, right? They wanted to set that fox down and see if they could lure or connect with another fox, which did not happen. Sometimes in life, we make all the best plans, and those plans do not come to fruition. Thinking back to your question, is there an area in this question, in this issue, where you've been thinking that it's going to go a certain way and it hasn't? What, in turn, is the other story that you might be missing? If Scott only told the story of the fox, there would be no story. But in this case, he didn't lure a fox, but he did lure a raven. And that raven was frightened. He was frightened about something he had no reason to be frightened about. How many people can relate to that? How many times have you thought there is a big, scary monster underneath your bed, and that's why you're not doing that thing? That's what happened to that raven. He kept circling and circling, and the fox did not move. The fox, in present time, gave him no reason to believe he was real. He wasn't moving, yet the raven was still scared. And to the point where he continued so much to be scared that that little piece of food that he picked up still wasn't as much as he could have. There was plenty of other pieces, but that little piece, he even couldn't hold on to that because of fear. And not just fear that's well-founded, not fear that's grounded, fear that in present time, when looked at objectively, there's no reason to fear. Think back to your question. In this area of your life, is there something you are afraid of that is not warranted. That is only based on a cookie cutter image of something rather than a real image. And for me, the invitation of this image, the invitation of the fox for you and your question is, where am I missing what's really happening? Sure, I planned to lure a fox. That didn't happen. But something else is happening. Something else is unfolding. What is that? And also, if you're being impacted by fear in some way, how can you see where it's actually a cardboard cutout, where it's actually not real? We breathe life into our fears all of the time where it does not exist. How are you doing that in this situation? And the medicine of the fox, the medicine is to remember things don't always turn out as planned, but sometimes they're more silly. Sometimes they're more joyful. Sometimes they're more fun. Sometimes we get the answer that we were looking for. Scott's question was, am I a good carver? Can I fool a fox? Well, he didn't fool a fox, but he did fool a raven. Did he get the answer to his question? Is he a good carver? I think he did. Are you getting the answer to your question in a way that you're not expecting it? And is there something, some element of fear that isn't exactly real that's preventing you from flying away with the goods? Okay, how are we doing? Last one. All right. Dun, 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 dun. Okay. So for those of you following along, we're on page 133, and we got the Japanese gong, which everybody on this podcast has heard. You heard it a few minutes ago. Every ride starts when the operator strikes the gong. Other carousels use a bell to send the animals spinning. Our gong was donated by Stuart Horowitz, a local friend of the carousel who spent many years in Japan with his wife Kay, raising their family. When rung, the gong in Buddhist religion is thought to activate experiences of bliss and rejuvenation. So we think it's an excellent way to start going around in circles, smiling in many goofy ways. In Burma, the ringing of a gong at temple sends the ringer's prayers for peace and good fortune out into the greater world. So what is the message of the gong? What is the essence of the gong? At the Carousel of Happiness, we start every magical ride and every magical episode of the podcast with a gong. And one of the reasons that we do that, or I do it specifically on the podcast, is to indicate to you, dear listener, and to me, to anyone who participates in these episodes, that this is a sacred space. It is a space where something magical can happen. By sounding a gong, we can alert ourselves and each other to the magic. We can also start to take action one gong strike at a time. And so for me, the essence of this message of the gong is, how can you set your intention to begin with this thing? Even if you're elbow deep in whatever situation you have, this is the moment where you can begin again. Every moment, every now is an opportunity to begin again. How can you bang a gong right now with this issue to indicate to yourself and to others that this is different, that this choice is a special choice? This choice is one that is different than any that you've taken before. If we want different results in our lives, we have to treat the decisions that we make as different and act accordingly. We have to show up in different ways. We have to shore ourselves up with our intention and decide that this is the moment where things change. This is the moment where I set down my phone, I set down my resentments, I set down my old behavior and try again. And here's the thing, you can figuratively bang a gong all day long. All day long. Make the wrong choice, go down the path, come right back. Bang a gong, start again. And so for me, the invitation for this page, this element of the carousel, is for you to know it's never too late to start again. It is never too late for you to set an intention for things to be different and move forward with that intention. That is the medicine of this page. That is the element of this symbol that you can take and apply to your question. How does it relate to your question? How does the koala and its message relate to your intention? How does the fox and the raven and George and Scott in the truck, how does that story relate to the thing you're working on right now? And then, how can you bang that gong, set a new intention, decide to show up differently, and do? Okay, folks, that was our carousel-inspired divination experience. If you've never had an intuitive reading, you had your first intuitive reading. Congratulations. How was it? Did you get an answer? Remember, all we're doing here, really, is listening to that quiet voice within us. You're listening to the words come out of my mouth, and you're connecting elements of the ones that matter most to you, and you're connecting that to your voice. That still, calm voice that we always have access to, but sometimes it's difficult to hear. What a divination tool can do, just like this book, is it can help us cut out some of the noise between us and our natural knowing. By setting an intention, posing a question, and expecting an answer, we find it's been right in front of our noses the whole time. How many of you knew your answer to that question before you even asked it? Truly knew. Once you got your answer, quote unquote, how many of you knew it all along? And one thing I want to point out is, yes, you can go see a professional psychic. You can go see a tarot card reader. If you feel called to, you absolutely should. But we don't need a middleman. We don't need an interpreter between us and us. We are all gifted access to this knowing, and tools like this, like divination tools, can help us hear that knowing more clearly. If you got something good, I want to hear about it. Send me an email, shoot me a text, swing by the carousel. Tell me, what did your inner voice say? What did it think about the koala, the fox, and the gong? In the meantime, take care. Be well. And as we like to say at the Carousel of Happiness, don't delay joy. And we'll see you next time around.
Beginnings and endings are only pretendings. I'll see you next time around. I'll see you next